everyone, and welcome to this session on bridging the ambition gap from planning to implementing local climate action. This session is presented by the Center for Public Impact and King County Metro as part of the Daring Cities Forum held by the local governments for sustainability. Before starting, we would like to get a quick sense of who is joining us today. So please go to the link shared in the chat and answer the questions on who you are. So I believe the link is already shared in the chat. So we'll just go over and just see who's here with us. So we have a lot of people like myself currently based in the US. Also, I'm Lisa Vincent, by the way. I am with the Center for Public Impact, and as I said, based in the US, specifically in New Jersey. So love that. Love seeing some New York City people right across the river from me. We have a lot from Brazil. Yeah, I'll give you all just a couple more seconds to add that before asking the next question. We have some Berlin, Philippines. Love that. And then we can go to the next question. The next question is, what field are you working in? I just really love seeing when, as the words change and you get an insight into where people are more leaning to. So clearly a lot of climate change persons in the room. Love that. Transportation, communications, we've government innovation, architectural education. Love that one. Human dimension of wildlife. Oh, that sounds very interesting. So we have a pretty diverse group, and so really excited for you all to come here and join us today. Really grateful to have all of you here, and really looking forward to sharing the work that we are doing with you all, and then also to hear from you all during the question and answer segment. So great, let me just reshare my screen. Hopefully everyone can see that properly. So for today's agenda, we'll first go over our two main objectives for this section and give you all a little bit more insight into why we're here and what we plan to do. Then we'll set some context by introducing the ambition gap, which is something that ICLEI prepared. And then we'll introduce King County Metro and its climate goals and get into the Center for Public Impact and some approaches that we use to support local governments with different things and specifically with climate action. We'll demonstrate the use of the systems innovation approach to enhance King County Metro's organizational capabilities to transition to an entirely zero emissions fleet by the year 2035. And then we'll end with the Q&A segment where we hope to answer any questions that you all may have. So why are we here today? Within the next 45 to 60 minutes, we aim to demonstrate how to tackle complex challenges using systems thinking. That is focusing on interconnectedness and interactions of both the explicit and implicit factors that may affect an agency or organization. We'll also highlight King County Metro's efforts to move from planning a complex zero emission bus transition to implementing it through internal work to break down silos and to learn by doing. We'll have three presenters today. Alyssa Wilbur from the Local Governments for Sustainability. Myself, as I mentioned, I'm Lisa Vincent, a Senior Associate with the Center for Public Impact, and Hoy True, the Zero Emissions Director from King County Metro based in Seattle, Washington. So without further ado, I'd like to introduce Alyssa Wilbur to present on the ambition gap and to give a little bit more context into our meeting today. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Lisa. And we can go to the next slide. So I will keep this brief, but as Lisa said, my name is Alyssa Wilbur, and I'm a program officer here with ICLEI USA. I'm excited to tee up the conversation today by sharing about ICLEI USA's ambition gap, policy brief that we published in 2023, which guides our approach to supporting local governments in bridging the gap between planning and implementation of climate action. So during 2022, our office engaged in more than 50 focused conversations with our members to understand the implementation priorities, barriers, and support needs of moving beyond planning for climate work and into actionable sustainability work. The discussions that we had with our members uncovered the disparity between the human and financial capacity allocated by local governments and the goals and ambitions that are being established as a part of climate action plans. We define this disparity as the ambition gap, a recognition that many local governments recognize the need to take significant action on climate, but this is often coupled with limited resource allocation required to actually meet their targets and goals. This policy brief intends to initiate a process to appropriate greater human and financial resource allocation towards transformative programs and projects to achieve municipal climate targets. So if you could go to the next slide, please. And this is a little hard to read on the screen, but this is available in the Ambition Gap report itself. But from these conversations, we developed recommendations for local governments and local government serving partners as they put federal dollars to work and push to accelerate climate implementation between now and 2030, which we know is really, really needed. One of these recommendations of the 7 stems from the finding that local governments require increased cross-departmental collaboration on climate action. I think many of us in local government climate work are all too familiar with, but often struggle to address this challenge within our existing structures, capabilities, and cultures. So we're thrilled to hear from Center for Public Impact today on their systems innovation method as a powerful approach to addressing this specific challenge. And at ICLEI USA, we seek to aid local governments through cross-departmental programming and strategic cooperation that engages sustainability teams with other agencies in their municipality. So I'd encourage you all to take some time after the session to read the brief, whether you're working for a local government or you're a government serving partner. These recommendations will hopefully support you in initiating a process to appropriate greater human and financial resource allocation towards the attainment of your local municipal climate targets. And next slide. And then I'll just close with a finding from the brief that this is finding number 7, that we recognize that special ingredients exist for climate action plan implementation success at the local level, and municipalities each have unique tools available to address climate change, but each of them require a bespoke support approach for how they are accomplishing this work. The brief includes what's called the Spectrum of Implementation Readiness exercise, and this is one of the ways that we are aiding local governments in understanding what their unique tools are that they have available to them and where they need to prioritize their efforts to effectively close the gap and implement transformative projects. So this is a very quick action assessment. It's available in the brief, along with all 7 key findings that I've discussed and those key recommendations for local governments and their local government serving partners. Go read that, and we have that posted in the chat for you. And then I just want to thank you all for joining us today to learn about a practical method being applied in King County to bridge the ambition gap and make strategic transformative changes to the county's transit system. So with that, I will hand it over to Hoy True with King County.
Hello, everybody. I was going to say good morning, but there's so many people joining us globally. My name is Hoy True, and I am King County Metro's Zero Emissions Program Director. Thank you for the opportunity to introduce you to our zero emissions fleet transition work and how we partnered with LaSalle and the team at the Center for Public Impacts to make sense of, plan for, and do the work to get our agency towards our ambitious goals by 2035. First, a quick intro to King County Metro. We are the 7th largest transit agency in the country, providing bus, trolley, streetcar, van pool, demand response, water taxi, and paratransit service. Collectively, these modes of transit require an operating fleet of almost 4,000 vehicles, spanning buses, cutaways, vans, non-revenue sedans, and water taxis. We deliver over 121 million rides annually to over 2.3 million residents in the Seattle region. Our expertise is built upon over 80 years of operating our trolley network since 1940. We are eager to We were the early adopters of hybrid diesel starting in 2004 and helped prototype and put into service a fleet of 11 fully electric battery buses in 2017. With our own component supply center, we also maintain and rebuild batteries, which is pretty unique for a transit agency, and thus have a lot of experience and technical knowledge that we've contributed to both bus manufacturers and other transit agencies. Next slide. Metro's vision is to deliver a regional, innovative, and integrated mobility network that is safe, equitable, sustainable, and reliable. Metro's strategic action plan, adopted by our council, is co-created with community. It outlines Metro's commitment to address the climate crisis and environmental justices. As part of the strategic climate action plan, the county has established targets to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by 45% by 2025 and 70% by 2030, compared to a 2017 baseline. So what is included in the strategy? First is to make transit preferable to driving alone and making our service greener. Reducing vehicle emissions is all of Metro's fleet, including those modes that we shared earlier, the bus, trolley, van, pool, access, flex services. All of those modes have targets to transition to zero emissions vehicles, including 100% zero emissions bus fleet by 2035, which is the focus of today's conversation. Although it's not written for a goal for our water taxi, we have plans to also convert our water taxi to a zero emission system as well. Advancing climate justice by working with the community to make it more resilient is another key pillar for this work. Achieving these ambitious goals will require technology advancements by manufacturers and industry to meet the operational and service needs of Metro's customers and operations. Metro will transition to a ZE fleet that is powered by renewable energy and use a phased approach to build out our infrastructure and simultaneously train and recruit workforce to deliver that service. We've also recently completed a climate vulnerability assessment plan to understand how Metro can prepare facilities and operations over time to build and fight against the climate hazards. Next slide. I think it's always important to look back at our history. So here's are some key decisions and achievements that set that foundation for a zero emissions future. I won't go through all of the history, but wanted to flag that we were one of the first agencies to deploy battery electric buses back in 2015 and committed to transitioning our fleet to 100% zero emissions powered by renewable energy back in 2017. Today, we are operating up to 40 battery electric buses in South King County, and we're in the process of procuring up to 370 battery electric buses, 90 of which will be delivered next year. Slide. Here's a summary timeline of the near-term key bus fleet milestones. There's a lot here, and I'll run through them briefly. Roughly 2 years ago, we built the self-based test facility located in Tukwila, where we're testing both pantograph down and plug-in charging from 2 different manufacturers and charge management technology. Earlier this year, our 40th battery electric bus arrived in Washington, and we've put them into service. For this fleet and our investment in BEVs, we have applied an equity framework to deliver service where there's a disproportionately high number of BIPOC and low-income residents. 86% of these blocks are in equity opportunity routes with the highest score of 4 or 5, and 14% are on routes with a score of 3 out of 5. We are also in the middle of a transit electrification study planning effort, the result of which is a more detailed plan of the capital projects needed to support Metro's transition beyond the projects shown here through 2035. In 2026, we will open interim base, also in Tukwila. This site will support 120 BEVs and is the first facility we've opened in over 2 decades. In 2028, we will open South Annex Base, which is adjacent to interim. This brand new state-of-the-art base will support up to 250 battery electric buses. We're pursuing Energy Pedal certification with International Living Future Institute, which will mean that this bus will be net zero, producing as much renewable electricity as the facility will require, using materials that avoid known toxins for human health, design that promotes health and wellness, and daylighting of salmon bearing stream. We know, based on the current range of BEVs, that roughly 70% of the work blocks can be satisfied by current BEV technology using overnight charging at the bases. However, roughly 30% of the routes will need some additional charging at layovers. Thus, we're investing in 5 layover charging projects distributed across South King County. You're starting to hear the complexity of this work. Between 2028 and 2035, we will undergo a tightly orchestrated body of work to electrify all remaining 7 bases that we have, along with charging infrastructure at layover locations to support routes from those bases. What that means is we're going to shut down a base, install those charging infrastructure, deploy that technology that is needed for operations, reopen those bases. Sounds pretty simple, but there's a lot of planning, especially around service, that needs to happen for that transition to be smooth and so that our customers don't feel any negative impacts. Critical to the strategy is using that mix of battery, electric buses, and trolley to reach our goals. Next slide. This transformational change is ambitious, large, and complex, and there's a lot of work to plan for, coordinate, and deliver for us to be ready for a zero emissions and fleet future. There are a few other transit agencies that has the ambitious goal to reach 100% ZE by 2035 using only battery electric buses with close to our fleet size and service profile. The scale at which we're doing this work compounds that complexity and risks. We're building and converting bases, procuring buses, procuring charging infrastructure, deploying technology to support our operations. Those are the tangible things that the public can touch and see and experience as they ride our system. There's also a large body of work to appropriately plan and adjust business processes and increase training to support this transition. While we're engaging with industry leaders and peer agencies and learning as we go, as there's no tested model for this work. We are the industry leaders, and while that's exciting, it is also daunting. Here's a list of a few risks as we manage the complexity and scale. First, planning for the future workforce is a significant body of work. We've developed a BEV Academy, which includes a curriculum that prepares all job classifications to operate and maintain batteries and charging infrastructure. And we're sharing this with other transit agencies and trade schools and universities to continue to develop that pipeline. Manage and mitigate cost overruns and on-time delivery, which we know is part of the core for any construction work. And importantly, sync construction timelines with the delivery of BEVs and the commissioning of our infrastructure. This is all going to require specialized contracting mechanism for construction, site inspection, site prep, installation, repair, maintenance, and permitting. It has required us to partner closely and differently with cities and jurisdictions, utilities, manufacturers, and community. Over the last year, there has been a significant increase in transit agencies committing to zero emissions goals. While that's exciting, to be on this journey and with all of these other transit agencies, it has meant that the demand for chargers and buses is high, resulting in supply chain vulnerabilities and long lead times. Additionally, electrification is a fast evolving landscape, and there's more technology now than ever. There are evolving standards resolving interoperability issues or data issues between charger, bus, and battery that is frustrating. To mitigate significant impacts on our operations, Metro is investing time to utilize self-based test facility to pilot and test various systems and technology. We're taking on our learning and sharing them back out with partners, manufacturers, and other transit agencies. There are some days where this work is overwhelming. I have bags under my eyes, which are pretty noticeable. There's a lot that keeps our team up at night, and we've leaned into other transit associations and reached out to many peers and even private sector to learn and adapt. A transformational change of this magnitude and complexity requires us to approach this work differently, as this change will affect every work group and appropriate engagement is critical for its success. It's important for work groups and divisions to own and drive this work forward. To facilitate that, we partnered with the Center for Public Impact to design a process that creates awareness of the changes that are to come, break down the silos across the teams as we think through what the risks and opportunities are, build in systems for learning on the go and navigating uncertain and ever-changing landscape. We know that this transformational change would not take hold if we didn't change our practices and culture. We're so lucky to partner with Center for Public Impact to co-create that approach with us. And Liselle's going to tell you more.
Thank you so much, Hoy. So I know a lot of y'all are probably wondering, what is the Center for Public Impact? Who are we? So the Center for Public Impact is a global nonprofit organization that works alongside government, public servants, and change makers to help governments work better for everyone. We have regional offices in North America, Europe, Asia, Australia, and New Zealand. And we also have cross-cutting teams focused on global development and climate change. CPI North America works alongside government partners such as King County Metro to understand their unique community contexts, goals, and priorities. Our work with governments are tailored to best meet their needs and is centered around 3 themes: action research, learning communities, and capability building. Through action research, we are exploring topics at the forefront of government and policymaking. Alongside our partners, we study in detail the issues and solutions critical to the future of governments. Through learning communities, we are bringing change makers together to connect and collaborate to find solutions to complex challenges. And through capability building, we are working alongside public servants to help them build knowledge and skills, develop better processes, and plant the seeds to improve work. Climate change remains a significant challenge for many of the cities that we work with. Cities are responsible for 70% of global carbon dioxide emissions, even though they contain 55% of the population. To date, over 12,500 cities worldwide have made climate commitments, and hundreds have adopted climate action plans to dramatically cut emissions and build resilience. And this is a wonderful fact. It makes us feel a bit hopeful. However, there remains a huge gap between planning and implementation for climate action. Only 13% of the cities received an A for climate implementation from the Carbon Disclosure Project. Furthermore, 84% of plans do not identify funding sources. And while 75% of plans name equity as a goal, few offer details about what building equity actually looks like in practice. In our work with more than 250 local governments and 2,000 public servants over the last decade, the Center for Public Impact has heard the same themes around what stands in the way of moving from planning to implementation on the biggest collective challenges of our time, including climate change. One of the things we heard was that structure was a big thing. Projects are typically executed in silos instead of as part of coordinated change effort. Another was culture. Government agencies often dwell in a culture that serves status quo inequities over innovation and risk-taking. And a third was capabilities. Traditional approaches to problem solving favor familiar solutions over innovation. Governments and other change makers often focus on the what. That is, the events that are visible to us and the patterns associated with them. CPI, on the other hand, invites practitioners to focus on both the what and the how. That is, the underlying structures and mental models that influence everything else happening in a system. Shifting these implicit components of a larger system can have bigger impacts than simply focusing on the what. Illustrates how systems thinking can lead to a more transformative approach to addressing 21st century challenges. And we know systems thinking might be a bit like new to some folks. And so don't worry, we have an example to take you through it before continuing. So one of the ways that systems thinking can show up in a local climate action is as follows. You might notice that implementation of a climate action plan is off schedule. Looking just below the surface, you recognize a pattern among staff, though. They aren't aware of current sustainability initiatives. And you assume that this is what causes the delay in implementation of the climate action plan. However, if you ask why city staff aren't aware of current initiatives, you find that cross-department staff lack formal time or space to connect, so they aren't able to share timely updates. And going even further into understanding the underlying mental models, you learn that staff believe that learning and cross-department collaboration is too much effort, and therefore they do not make time for it. Now, if you had simply focused on the observed event or pattern, that is, the delayed implementation of the climate action plan and lack of awareness of initiatives, you might have come up with solutions such as extending the schedule or circulating a staff newsletter with sustainability initiatives. But these would not have addressed the root issues. Instead, you could focus on creating more opportunities for staff to meaningfully collaborate. You could help them to see collaboration as a tool that can lead to more efficiency, resource sharing, and enhanced capabilities. And in doing so, you could address some of the challenges higher up the iceberg. And we're also very aware that there are other mental models that may affect this observed event. Like there are so many things that could be affecting this and impacting this. And systems thinking is really getting into the root cause of this problem and looking at all of the different factors and trying to make sure that what you're finding what's at the base of the iceberg, and therefore able to address the events and the patterns and the structures. So as I said, what we just did is called systems innovation. Systems innovation is a holistic approach to shifting the underlying dynamics, mental models, and conditions of a complex problem to enable adaptiveness and transformative change within an organization's structure, behavior, and functional capabilities. This approach uses a 4-step process. Step 1 is to understand the system. Through this step, we aim to gain an appreciation for the complexity and interconnectedness of different elements within an organization or community. We focus on developing an understanding of what is going well and what stands in the way of change. Step 2 is to align on a mission by bringing axes together to set a vision for the future that will inspire action and alignment on the principles required to succeed. Step 3 is to experiment and learn. It entails designing a portfolio of interventions that will help move people towards the mission designed in step 2. Teams will experiment with interventions, reflect on learnings, and iterate. And the 4th and final step is to pollinate these learnings and share them across the organization with others and connect for collective ideation and learning. We use the systems innovation approach in our partnership with King County Metro. Through this partnership, we aim to transform Metro into a more innovative learning organization that will enable them to switch from approaching challenges through isolated initiatives across silo teams to approaching challenges through synchronized innovation throughout the entire system. Over 1 year, we collaborated across 4 areas of work. First, we help staff and leadership from 10 Metro divisions to see their role in the ZE transition and understand who they depend on, who depends on them, and how their actions influence the system. We listened to staff's thoughts on what has helped or hindered the zero emissions transition and developed a systems map and contextual analysis to highlight the structures, relationships, and the mindsets that drive Metro's zero emissions work. We use a bottom-up and top-down approach to engage both line staff and leadership, resulting in a charter outlining a joint mission and vision for zero emissions, as well as organizational commitments required to meet the moment. We created a replicable process for generating innovative ideas that can be built out into experiments to help with the zero emissions transition, and tested it on a group of leaders, generating over 50 ideas on how to prioritize service and riders throughout the transition. And throughout all of these 3 first steps, you practice synthesis and storytelling as a cross-cutting area of work. Through this, we discussed the lessons learned throughout the process and communicated the learning journey inside and outside of this county. Furthermore, throughout this process, we also centered equity by intentionally reaching out to staff from different hierarchical levels and divisions and ensuring that we had a diverse and representative body of persons as much as possible while talking through each of these steps. Now I'll pass it on to Hoy, who will speak on the insights and lessons learned throughout this journey.
Through the various engagements that we co-designed and facilitated in partnership with the CEL and the team at CPI, we learned a ton. We heard from those across the various teams and across all levels. Even though some teams felt the challenges and opportunities more acutely, there was a universal understanding of how hard and also how exciting it is to navigate this work. Organizing the themes and insights into these 3 categories helped everybody understand the challenges and opportunities better. The themes and insights were broken down into structural, relational, and mindset categories that need to be addressed. In this work, we engaged over 150 employees. For structural themes, We heard that the speed and scale of the transition requires new mechanisms for knowledge sharing and information flow to reduce current silos. Second, internal processes and external market forces impacted ability to hire, leading into long-term gaps in needed labor. And importantly, and as many of you who work in government may understand, government and nonprofit, everyone is working on everything a little bit when they can. Working on the ZE transition is an extra assignment on top of existing work, and those shifting priorities can be really hard to navigate. Under relational, we captured that decision-making is both decentralized and hierarchical at the same time, preventing critical and consistent contributions from key actors. Second, external relationships are essential but underutilized as potential allies. Third, the idea of sharing power is embraced in name but not always in practice. And then under mindset, the emphasis on that 2035 goal has created both a sense of urgency that some find inspiring, as I do, and others find paralyzing, as I also do. This is what keeps me up at night. Second, failure is seen as costly, and there's a fear of getting things wrong when the stakes feel so high. I know our capital team specifically feels this pretty strongly. And then last, the ZE transition can feel at odds with the service-forward culture that Metro has promoted in the past. Next slide. Out of the engagement, CPI worked with our team to capture 8 goals. For structural, develop information sharing and making decisions so that folks understand better the why is critically important. And we mapped the workforce needs and recruitment processes. For relational change, breaking down those silos and collaborating across the entire department every step of the way, define our decision-making process and make it clear with everybody was really critically important. And then partner with key players to shape the future and change structural elements that can hinder an equitable ZE transition. Out of that, a new team was built. So it was like a very direct result of this work. And last, mindset. And this is ongoing work, but acknowledging that failure is inevitable during this complex ZE transition and embrace failure as opportunities for iteration and learning. It's something that I think every organization challenges and struggles with. Second, increasing risk appetite and ability to experiment with deviating from established procedures. As a result of this, and concurrently to this, we actually changed our risk appetite for climate and sustainability work, pushing for more risk leaning initiatives, and decision-making was a critical piece of this. Third, harnessing Metro employees' passion for climate justice, national leadership, and innovation to galvanize the mindset, relationship, and structural changes needed to be successful. Next slide. As I mentioned, this work is still ongoing, but we've observed real change. As you can see here, the categories from siloed, daunting, invisible, narrow, fixed, to that shared, promising, visible, expansive, and changeable work is something that we have heard both from our staff and all the various engagements, and we're feeling, like we are actually going through that transformational change at this point. So there are a bunch of quotes here to really demonstrate that program highlight. So we've heard staff say, we all have to roll up our sleeves, care for each other, and ask questions about each other's work. That really represents that ability to empathize and to understand better why a work group has decided to do a thing differently than how somebody else in another division may have. From daunting to promising, one of the things that I see on the daily is that the zero admissions work is no longer a mystery. For me, that was really big in awareness setting, and to really set that motion in play that folks know that this work is where it's going, what's important, what the priorities are. We also know that 94% of Metro Leadership Workshop participants said that they could better identify underlying dynamics impacting decision-making. Within our capital division, we heard we're not just embarking on a project, we're changing the way of doing business together. And then lastly, from the fixed to changeable, we need to hone in on individual steps to take things piece by piece and give technology the opportunity to evolve. That has really contributed to our strategy and approach of phasing this work in a way that prioritizes that service. Next slide. There are many, many lessons that we learned through this journey, but here are the top 4 that I think are really important to ensuring that this work sticks. First, the systems map and other tools are a means and not an end. People often focus on the output over the process. However, the engagement process itself generates valuable time together and to learn. For example, conversations and workshops held during the mapping process enabled people to view challenges and opportunities through a systemic lens and build relationships with colleagues across divisions. Second, making seemingly mundane day-to-day decisions transparent and collaborative goes a long way to build trust. Everyday actions impact that trust. These can include consistent efforts by managers to get to where work is being done, increasing information flows, listening to and acting on feedback provided by staff. Frontline staff emphasize that trust is about demonstrating that feedback is taken seriously. One of the key things is also going back to staff and saying, hey, we heard you, but for XYZ, this didn't work out. And communicating that respectfully and clearly really does go a long way. Third, sharing power can quickly become a buzzy phrase that hinders meaningful co-creation. Authentically sharing power means going beyond that phrase itself and defining the parameters for engagement. When leaders frame engagements as co-creation, but decision-making power doesn't actually rest with the co-creators, it hinders collaboration and erodes trust. Fourth, people at the margins of an organization are seasoned veterans at navigating complexity. There's often an assumption that frontline staff do not have a holistic view. However, staff at the margins are well equipped to understand complexity due to their unique experiences trying to overcome their day-to-day challenges. For example, when bus operators and mechanics see this downstream effects of change, they are able to trace it back to its root cause quickly. I'm always so amazed at our frontline staff, and particularly our engineers and our mechanics that work in our vehicle maintenance division. It's pretty powerful. When they speak up, it's always with a lot of thought and a lot of real experience that comes out. All right, next slide. So where do we go from here? Metro and CPI are continuing to partner to look at how ZE-specific decision-making process can be improved. Then we're going to test those new processes and make adjustments, learning and adapting along the way. We're also co-creating a program to support staff and leaders lead through that change, uncertainty, and ambiguity. Certainly, those new leadership skills will go way beyond ZE in this fast-evolving world that we live in. And we're engaging forums like this to spotlight CPI as an incredible partner to think through systemically and holistically how governments can use this approach to implement ambitious climate goals. Next slide. We invite you to learn more about this work. Please visit CPI's website. The link will be provided in the materials. There's a really fun blog series that traces the work and progress across our journey over the last year. You can reach out to LaSalle if you want to partner on bringing on that systems approach to your community. Her email is provided here. And then to learn more about King County Metro and our climate and sustainability goals, you can reach out directly to me via this email. We are happy to take your questions at this time and your comments. There are 2 ways of doing that. You could put your questions or comments in the chat or raise your hand if you have questions and you want to get off mute, and we'll have facilitators join us to get to everybody that we can.
Great. Thanks so much, Hoy and LaSalle. I'll go ahead and facilitate some initial questions that we have just to get us started. And then, as we said, please feel free to put questions in the chat or raise your hand to unmute yourself if you'd like to ask your question out loud. So the first question for you is, what are some of the tangible structural changes that have been made since doing this work?
Such a good question. I will say that I think from a structural change piece, the team has just expanded, quite frankly. At the very beginning of this journey, there were a handful of folks in the capital division and a handful of folks in the vehicle maintenance division, because we knew we had to build up those bases and also operate the new BEVs. But there was very little engagement across the department. So a new team was actually built to break down those silos in the general manager's office. So when I joined roughly 2 years ago, I was an individual contributor, and my job was to coordinate across the entire department. And now I have a team of 9 folks, and they're all embedded actually in the divisions and then matrix into me. And I think that design, that structural design of having the folks sit in their divisions but have a cohesive strategic team that's centralized really empowers us to break down those silos, to force us to share information and collaborate across the department. So that's a very tangible, direct piece around the structural pieces there. In addition to just changing how we recruit differently, quite frankly, is another big structural change that we have just in terms of business processes.
That's great. Great. So I think the next one could be for Lisel. So we're focusing on transit today for the purpose of this conversation, but how can we apply this work to sectors outside of transit? We saw quite a few people at the beginning indicate that they're working across different areas and sectors. So take it away.
Thanks so much for that question. So I think like the work that we have been doing, like we initially came into this thinking, yeah, we're going to focus on transit, we're going to focus on climate. But then we quickly realized that this is something that requires more of a broad organizational change. And it's something that is like people first and people centered. And so it's something that like any agency, any organization that has like a really big and complex situation, challenge that they want to address, that they can come together and look at every single aspect of their system, look at the structures that might be holding them back from that challenge, the relationships and the mindset, and come together to build on that, to identify the system, to align on their mission, to figure out what kind of leverage points there are. And so leverage points are those areas where a small change can result in a really big, tangible, meaningful impact, and to basically find that solution and to find those points where they can make that shift. And so this here is, we're focusing on transit right now, but it's really just the organization that we're working to impact and the people. And once again, I stress people because going into this, I don't think we really estimated and valued how much the people were going to be at the center of the change. And so we got in, and then we started talking with divisions, and we realized, hey, that this is a really big area where there needs to be change. And this is one of the biggest sticking points for Metro, is that those siloing of teams. And I think that it speaks to so many organizations, so many agencies across the spectrum. And so, yeah, so I think this is something that a lot of people are learning about now. And therefore it's something that a lot of organizations can definitely work to adapt to.
Great, thanks. And we actually have a question that sort of builds on that from Emily. And she's asking who is best suited within a local government to present a call for action for systems innovation. And then she adds a little bit more. So what if senior leadership is heavily committed to business as usual, and it's more junior employees who would like to see this change and believe in its benefits? What is your kind of recommended plan of action there?
Hoy, I could start this one off, but definitely want you to jump in just based on our experience with Metro and like the importance of having leadership involved. Systems change is something that requires like all levels to participate in. And you're so right, Emily, that like if it's just like lower level staff, like there's a power gap there. And that is something that I think really was a place that we talked about a lot about. Like one of our really big findings was that sharing power is critical, it's necessary. And we were fortunate in Metro that we do have some high-powered players who are on board with this and that have been able to like, get that top-down institutionalization of it. We have like some of the leaders at Metro who are talking about like failing forward. And that is, we mentioned failing forward. And so that's like, accepting failure and risk as a way to learn and grow. But also implementing that is so much harder than actually saying it, right? But I think like just trying to get the buy-in of leadership. And one of the things we've done is really to focus on champions. So through communication, we build that relationship with the leader and get them to talk to other leaders and get them to get that buy-in and kind of spread it out. And I think that is like a really important question, because it's like a lot of times change comes from lower level staff, like the recognition that there needs to be change come from lower level staff. And so it's but that power dynamic is critical, and you might have change sit at that level. But yeah, I don't know, Toy, you have anything to add there?
I'll share that at Metro, there was, I think that the frontline staff, or the non-senior staff, I would call them, they are probably one of the most critical folks, in my opinion, because they knew what this change was going to mean, and they're thinking way ahead of like the operational implications of this. And through working closely with them, and actually, I think more focused attention of connecting those senior leaders with the frontline staff really helped bridge that gap that I think is like really important for change management and adoption. I actually think that the struggle, and I don't know if others feel this way in government agencies, but it was middle management where we had like the hardest time, quite frankly, because they are the folks who are really trying to balance the expectations of what senior leaders are putting out in terms of goals, and then the frontline staff who are going to physically go through a lot of change in their day-to-day work. And so in this beautiful design that CPI helped us, pull together, it was engaging at multiple levels and then convening them all in a space so that they can all interact and share with each other their experiences and their expertise and knowledge. And I think just hearing from both the frontline staff and the senior level staff was like a really powerful event. There was a workshop that CPI helped us host where they spent the first day actually engaging with all of these little activities at all of our sites, capturing their input, and then reporting them back out and inviting some of those staff in with senior leaders was really quite a powerful day.
Great, thank you both. Oh,
Sorry, just
yeah,
one other thing I want to add with that point on that frontline engagement that we did. I think that one of our most impactful parts of that was that we had someone with our team on the ground, someone who the staff trusted. They knew she had started off as a bus driver and went up the ranks and was in a more leadership position. And because the frontline staff who we engaged knew her, she was able, I wasn't in that team, but one of my coworkers came in and she said, she just went into the breakout room and hey, we have some questions for you all. I just approached it with such a human way and just that connection way. And we were able to get some really impressive and honest results from that. So just flagging the need for a champion, underground champion.
Great, thank you. Hopefully that was helpful for Emily. So we have a question, this concept I'm not familiar with, but maybe you two are. A question from Jim that's, have you used skunkworks with frontline champions to address discrete, I lost it, I'm sorry, discrete problems?
I would say that we, formally no. I believe that Chunkworks is an approach that is, it's pretty known, but what we did in building out our team was that we did, one of the key elements of that was really taking staff away from their day-to-day work, but they have expertise in their area. So we knew that we really had to lean into their subject matter expertise and their understanding of operations to design what the future looked like. One of the elements of this is really change management. So it's understanding how our current bus operations works day to day. So we needed somebody who really understood what the current process was. And then we needed somebody to know the technology and know the battery electric bus and charging infrastructure enough to imagine what that future was going to look like. Again, we're super lucky that we have such smart staff. The fleet engineering team specifically just had so much knowledge. So what we did was we actually pulled in Jeff Long, who our CPI folks know, who had worked for about 20 years, really working in the fleet engineering division, piloting buses, really testing the edges, the boundaries of how far we can push a bus and the battery. And we pulled him into our work group as part of the CPI body of work. And he repeatedly gave just incredible insights about, the culture that was happening in the field, the fear that the mechanics had around losing their job. How do we, address those, and how do we also talk about the changing technology and reassure staff that, truthfully, quite frankly, jobs aren't going to get lost, that we were going to bring our staff and all of that labor along with us and build in that training. So that's a component of, that methodology that we took in, which is, so that's one example in our vehicle maintenance and fleet engineering staff. Another example is that we took schedulers into this work. And the schedulers were former operators. So again, they really understood their work. They really had a pause on their scheduling body of work so that they can contribute meaningfully to this engagement. And I think that's really made all the difference to ensure that we're designing that future and folding in both the human dynamics of it, the change management that comes along with it, on this journey with us. Such a good question. And it's giving me a lot of thought on whether or not we should, more intentionally fold that into the design of our team. So thank you, Jim.
All right, great. These are great questions. Keep them coming to our audience. We have another one. Kudos for a great presentation, first of all, from them. And then talking about organizational transformation and equity work are often areas where moving slowly to bring people along and be inclusive is key. But one of the challenges of working on climate action is that we need to start moving faster to make the change that's needed. How do you balance these needs?
I love this question. It's a perpetual challenge that we have. And for me, it's an opportunity rather than a challenge. I have seen too often that for the sake of speed and schedule, that we don't do the appropriate engagement, and we don't have that thinking of who's not at the table, whose voice isn't getting heard, who is going to really impact this voice that you're not taking into consideration when you implement a body of work. And in those circumstances, what ends up happening is that you experience that delay later. You're dealing with the resistance from that work, and the constant questioning of that approach and the lack of adoption for that work. And so while it does take a little bit more time up front to really engage appropriately, and in that engagement be really clear. Are we engaging to inform? Are we engaging to co-create? Are we engaging to make decisions? Having those expectations up front is really important, and in fact actually speeds up the work further down. And so it's a very similar, I think, approach to planning up front, right? Like doing that hard work early so that you could have a smoother implementation approach later is critically important. And I would say that Metro is so lucky because we had partnered with CPI on an equity body of work, even prior to this last year that we had the fortunate opportunity to partner with them on this. And so we are pretty well equipped in equity. Most of our work, there's an equity framework that we apply to almost everything that we do, whether that is, restructuring our service, whether that is making an investment in, even how we contract out. There's a whole equity framework that is applied in this body of work. And at first it felt like just a checkbox, to meet those equity goals and to be in alignment with our core values. And now, I'm 7 years in, and it's pretty incredible that it's almost unsaid because people do know it, and people are really applying those principles of who's not represented in the room and what are those impacts going to be, and how do we pull in the voices that formerly weren't heard into a decision-making space. It's pretty powerful. I mean, still a lot of work to do. I'm not saying that we're done, but it's certainly a journey for us.
Yeah. And I really want to emphasize Joy's point on the importance of planning. I think that's one of the places where, and even in that design phase, and I think it's really important to be intentional with how you're, and that would save you so much time in the long run. And who is in the room and recognizing that, yeah, it should not just be a checkbox. Like that too could take time, but you have to be really intentional and upfront about who is going to contribute to this, who is going to be impacted by this work, and make sure that you have those people in the room and make sure that they know that they have a purpose in that room. You don't want people to just be invited into a space where they know that, okay, I'm here, but I'm not really going to be able to contribute to this, or I'm just here as a figurehead. I think that that does a lot to hurt morale. And so just once again, flagging the importance of intentionality and the design work. And that was something we were fortunate to have with Metro. I think like being able to like have those faces, have people in the room and give us these heads up, let us know, okay, these are people who are important, but also be honest about themselves and that we haven't done our due diligence with engaging these people. We haven't done our due diligence in this area, and like recognizing that and asking questions of how do we improve this area? How do we get better? So yeah.
Great. Thank you both. I appreciate that so much. I think sometimes those can be hard questions to ask, but they need to be asked. So we have, I think, time for one more question, and it's kind of a big one, but let's just maybe try to get to the surface of it. So in conversations with various municipal staff, a reoccurring theme that presents itself as a roadblock to the implementation of our municipality's climate action plan, whether from utilizing new and innovative building materials to climate resilient community development design, is it's too expensive and the developers will never go for it. How do you get past the developers, maximize profit with minimum investment and preservation of existing environmental mitigation features in the exiting people farm style of community development? That was a loaded one. We're going to put it in the chat for you both, but I think you got the gist of it.
I think here it is, I think it's a mixture of a lot of things that have to go right and be in alignment. I think one, it's like that there's policy and mandates out there. You know, we're really feeling this, quite frankly, in the decarbonization of buildings and facilities work that we have at King County Metro, where there's just a big drive for more sustainable concrete, asphalt, you know, all the materials that are more sustainable. And with that comes a much higher increase in pricing, right? And so I think one, having that policy to really call to and say, this is a requirement, we're not going to deviate from that value. And then secondly, really strategically partnering with your procurement staff, you know, and really working through and threading that requirement and mandate into that contracting mechanism so that the bidders and the construction work, you know, the construction companies who are private entities, they want to make money off of this, right? Give them an incentive, you know, one, be very clear that this award is not going to go to the cheapest or the lowest bidder, and stick to it. It takes an extra backbone to really, you know, stand by that decision, quite frankly, but the support of the organization by saying, hey, we have policy established, our procurement documentation is really clear, we've outlined the evaluation criteria, and stand by the value of that. And I think what you'll find is the end result is you may be paying a little bit more, but over time, that return is pretty incredible when it comes to climate change and sustainability. And there's a huge sense of pride. We're actively feeling this right now with our South Annex space for that Living Building Challenge work. The renderings on it is something that the staff has felt, I've never seen such excitement, quite frankly, from staff, because we are shooting for that really high standard for sustainable building. And, you know, it hasn't gone out yet to bid in terms of construction, so it'll be interesting to see what comes in, but I'm a huge supporter of just really staying true to the sustainability pieces and not going to the lowest bidder.
Great. Thank you for that. I think that's a great note to wrap up on. I just want to thank Hoy and King County and Lisel and CPI for participating in today's really impactful session. And for our audience, a reminder that we have our next event coming up on August 13th, and it will be coupling local climate solutions, integrating energy, mobility, and finance. So we hope to see you all there. And there's a link to register included in the chat. Thank you, everybody.